Thank you, Alex. So we raised the question in this work, what kind of institutional changes can we observe in this crisis where the institutional rules of economic governance are being changed? And as you all know, on the one hand, we have these very visible, very salient changes like the ESM, like the ESFS, like the Fiscal Compact, which we all know, which have been debated in the public and were contested as well. But what we want to focus on and theoretically also explain is why, beyond these very salient formal changes, there are a lot of incremental changes happening, as it were, in a covert way, which happen after the adoption of a formal rule. And we will focus on 3 examples, which are just illustrations of this phenomenon, which is very frequent and has been very frequent in the development of European institutions as such, and also in this particular crisis situation and redefinition of the rules of economic governance. These informal rules, which emerge after a formal rule has been adopted in the open political arena, may be kind of efficient in the sense that they save transaction costs and everybody agrees with this informal rule, or, and these are the rules we focus on, they may be indeed shift power from actors across levels and from the legislative to the executive. And we will discuss examples of these changes. But first, I would like to say a few words about the theoretical explanation. We argue that the main kind of social scientific theories which have been used in political science to explain why institutions emerge, how they are designed, and how they change, are not able to capture these phenomena that we call interstitial institutional change. So the main theories in political science are the principal-agent models and transaction cost economics. Principal-agent model focuses on the delegation of a task from a principal to an agent, assuming that there is information asymmetry between the principal and the agent in favor of the agent. And this may lead to an adverse selection of the agent and moral hazard on the part of the agent. This model has been used widely in European studies in the work of Mark Pollack, Fabio Franchino, and Rasmussen as regards the European Parliament, Winkler on the European Monetary Union. But this model, as it has been developed by economists, actually explains the choice of a complete contract on which then once it has been adopted, no change can actually happen because everything is in the ex-ante contract, all the incentives for the agent to comply with the delegated task are in the contract ex-ante. So it doesn't capture institutional change. Transaction cost economics, as developed by Williamson, of course, raises the question of why is which kind of organization chosen, in this case at the European level, and a lot of literature in political science. For instance, Moravcsik has argued for the choice of a particular organizational form of why national sovereignties are pooled at the European level, or Maione, why powers has been delegated to EU organizations. But TCE is very interesting in the sense that it comes up with an organizational solution which is equally beneficial to all. And we all know, of course, that many organizations and institutional rules distribute benefits unequally. That is, some gain and some lose under these rules. And the question, which is, of course, at the heart of political science as well, why is it that these institutional rules emerge which distribute actually power unequally and actually benefits of a particular influence in using this rule unequally? Now, that's where we come in with our theory of interstitial institutional change. There we assume that actors are boundedly rational. They seek to increase their institutional power to influence policy outcomes, that there are transaction costs, that is, costs of information collection, negotiation, and monitoring contracts. And as a consequence, contracts are always incomplete. That is, institutional rules are always incomplete in the sense that in the course of their application, they will be renegotiated or reinterpreted, and in the course of this renegotiation will be transformed and give rise to a new interstitial informal institutional rule. Why? I already said there is a functionalist argument for this, which just says, okay, because it's faster, it's less information collection, we all agree on this informal rule. That happens a lot, but we are shifting on, we're focusing actually on the question of what if rules emerge where power, there is a power-based distributive negotiation, which then leads indeed to a shift of power in the application of the initial formal rule in the course of the emergence of the informal interstitial rule. That is the power-based distributive bargaining argument. So, and the argument, classical argument in political science, is the player who has the better fallback position in the negotiation process is the one who has more influence, more weight in shaping the informal rule, and will be profit more from the outcomes of this particular rule. Now we chose, just for illustration's sake, it's not a test of the theory. We did this otherwise jointly with Katrin Muri, who is here too, and Karl Friedrich Bergström, who is here as well at the conference, in a different context, in a book on comitology and in a book with Christine Reh on early agreements and co-decision. We did quantitative and qualitative proper tests, but here it's just an illustration as regards the empirical exercise. But the cases are from the book, which is forthcoming now with Oxford University Press, 2012, where I would like to show how, in terms of this, in the form of this covert change, there has been an important horizontal institutional shift in the formulation of rules of how the excessive economic imbalances in member states are being controlled and decided upon by the Commission. As you know, the six-pack regulation plus two-pack regulation, which are in a way the second pillar in order of economic governance in Europe, includes one important regulation, which is the regulation on the prevention and correction of macroeconomic imbalances, which has the aim of controlling, preventing possible future economic imbalances in member states. And for this purpose, you need a scoreboard. A scoreboard has been created with particular indicators, and these indicators measure macroeconomic and macro-financial imbalances on current account balances, real effective exchange rates, export market shares, house prices, private sector debt, and unemployment rates. So this scoreboard and the indicators of this scoreboard were very contested in the decision-making process, and actually the conflict focused on the question whether the fleshing out of the indicators of this scoreboard should now be, the Commission would have liked to see just a Commission decision. The Parliament would have liked to see a delegated act under the Lisbon Treaty, Article 290, and the Council wanted to see an implementing act under the Lisbon Treaty, Article 291. Let me just say a few words about the difference of these two articles, because they have an implication as regards the power of the actors who are involved. On the delegated acts, the Commission is delegated power to adopt acts of general scope, supplementing or amending certain non-essential elements of legislation. And either the Council or the Parliament may revoke or object to a Commission delegated act. And the Parliament is totally co-equal of the Council. Now, under implementing acts, which is very similar to the old comitology procedures with modified committees, There are the committees with the Commission, a chair, and Member States representatives, experts in shaping the deal through rules on the implementing acts. The European Parliament doesn't have any role whatsoever. As you can imagine, therefore, the Parliament doesn't like to use implementing acts, but wishes to use delegated acts. Under the Lisbon Treaty, and that's where we get back to our theory now, the Lisbon Treaty provisions are, to say the least, very unclear as how to Article 290 and 291 are to be used in practice. So what is supplementing exactly? What is amending exactly? So as soon as the kind of fleshing out decisions were to be taken, the first conflict kind of emerged already between the Parliament and the Council over which article to use. And now just to give a few figures, which were actually collected by Frederik Bergström, that interestingly, since the adoption of the Lisbon Treaty, actually implementing acts are the vast majority of acts which have been used, and delegated acts have been used very, very rarely. I'll skip here the numbers because I don't have enough time, which you may see in the PowerPoints. So we have a frequent deadlock as regards the choice of type of article, and in this particular instance of the regulation on the prevention and correction of macroeconomic imbalances, again, about the scoreboard regime, again, there was a big conflict. The Commission wanted to propose the scores indicators all by itself. No intervention, neither Council nor Parliament. The Council, as usual, favored an implementing act. The Parliament wanted a delegated act. So what happened was a deadlock and things didn't move, but things were supposed to move. There was pressure, crisis. So in the ensuing bargaining process then, a completely new rule was developed, the so-called compromise procedure. And the new compromise procedure says the Commission should closely cooperate with EP and Council when drawing up scoreboard and set of macroeconomic and macro indicators. And the EP and Council may comment on plans to establish and just indicators and thresholds, and the Commission should inform EP and Council of any changes, indicators and threshold, and explain reasons for change, which is clearly, if you compare it to a delegated act where both Parliament and Council have a right to object and revoke a decision of the Commission, is clearly much less. In short, you could say that in this interstitial rule change, the Commission comes out as a winner. Now, in the case 2 is also related to the same regulation, but I would like to point out a very important vertical institutional change from the national level to the European level, and at the European level really to the Commission, which has happened under this regulation. Now, as you know, with these scores, the Commission can define a lower threshold and an upper threshold of what is considered to be likely to be an economic imbalance. And in case that it identifies such a threat or danger, it issues recommendations which may become binding and then entail quasi-automatic sanctions, fines in case of non-compliance. The interesting thing is now, and that's pointed out by Scharpf in his article of 2012, that this rule that whether a scoreboard indicator is being applied or whether the Commission decides now to intervene and warn a member state as to a possible imbalance is completely up to the Commission because, and he in a way rightly argues, the economies are so diverse across member states that it is not possible to come up with a general rule at which point which type of report and which type of fine should be triggered. And that's exactly the thing then. The rule doesn't, and so there is in a way where the Commission decides whether to impose such a procedure, and it doesn't go through a general kind of decision-making process at the European level, neither in the Council nor in the Parliament. And that means, of course, if you imagine what the recommendations of the Commission could imply as regards domestic policy measures, be it social policy, be it employment policy, be it labor relations, whatever which may kind of be implied in a possible macroeconomic imbalance, or tax policy indeed, is a very, very incisive step and development as regards actually an uploading of national competencies to the European level, and at the European level actually to the executive. So my third example, which is based on the work of Yannis Karayannis, he looked at in depth this particular case of the new super commissioner, Olli Rehn. Here we have a case of actually where it's quite a complete contract, because the treaties very exactly say that the body, the Commission should be a flat hierarchy, not independent ministries, but collectively responsible, a collegiate body. And the historical background of why the Commission was formed in that way was that France wanted antitrust policy, Germany did not want a strong antitrust policy, and therefore, in order to come up with a kind of consensus whether to go ahead with, in a way, a community project, France had to assure Germany that no policy would be implemented against German targets, which was guaranteed by the institutional form of compromise, that is multitask and collegial governance in the Commission. Now, that has, as an institution, has actually, a form of institution has held up very well until the current crisis. And the important background conditions now for why this was changed by Barroso, was of course one aspect of that the Commission during the crisis to some extent was upstaged by France and Germany, the so-called directorate for a while. That is, it lost in relative terms in influence, the rising Eurosceptic populism in member states, and of course the severity of the sovereign debt crisis and the urgency situations, and we have to act fast. So, as you know, Barroso announced in the fall of 2011 that the end of the across-the-board collegiality, and that Olli Rehn is to be vice president with reinforced status and additional working instruments, which are quite considerable, exclusive authority to control national budgets of Eurozone states, including tax and spending plans, before the national parliaments can do so. That is, as we speak, still the way of how it is being controlled is discussed right now under the 2-pack, 6+2-pack regulations. The Commission actually wanted to have a full veto, but member states were opposed. So that's where we are. So why did this happen? Why did Barroso come up with this proposal? And Yannis argues that there was bargaining game in a way between France and Germany on the one hand, and under Sarkozy, and Barroso on the other hand, and that the northern states basically had three options. They could stick to the same mode of governance that was already in place, which was traditional, but risk then a problem of spilling over of a fiscal crisis to them, a financial crisis. The second option was to create a new mechanism of governance outside the community structures, thereby forcing a solution on the southern partners. And the third one, find a way to limit the influence of southern interests and the states in the management of the euro, while not totally alienating the already fragile southern governments. As you know, the solution was then a semi-official limitation to the principle of multitask collegiality as an informal institutional rule, which was considered to be the best way to secure to limit the influence of the southern member states in the euro management, and to avoid the costs of the option A and B. Now, this was far from consensual, and the objective governments, there was some protest. The support came from of the super commissioner came from Germany, Finland, and the Netherlands. And while Sarkozy was still in government, Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Italy could not organize an effective alternative coalition against the super commissioner. So at the very moment, now with Hollande, he has gone back, has withdrawn from this kind of coalition. And as we speak now, on the other hand, as you've seen, Merkel has proposed, supported by Schäuble, to formalize the super commissioner. So as we speak now, this process of interstitial institutional change is ongoing. We don't know whether it will lead to a formalization or not. So conclusion, yes, institutional change has happened in the new economic governance under the impact of the financial crisis and the euro crisis. In part, it has been clear, deliberate overt institutional change, accounted for also by the theories, kind of the classical theories in EU studies. But beyond that, you could observe also a lot of kind of covert interstitial institutional change after the adoption of the new formal rules, which has brought a lot of de facto changes about. Thank you very much.